She didn't cry at the funeral. Not because she wasn't grieving, she was, but because the grief was the kind that sits too deep for tears, the kind that settles into the chest like wet concrete and hardens there, and you carry it around for weeks before you even understand what it is you're carrying. Her daughter hadn't spoken in 11 days, not to the grief counselor the school had arranged, not to the pediatrician who came twice and left both times with a practiced, careful look on his face, not to her aunts who flew in from Atlanta and sat in the kitchen making food nobody ate, not to anyone. Zora was 9 years old, and she had watched her father collapse on a Tuesday morning while making pancakes, and something inside her had simply gone quiet. Adeze Obi, no, wait. The woman who stood at the window of her daughter's bedroom was 51 years old, built the kind of way that people called formidable, without meaning it, as a compliment, with close-cropped natural hair going silver at the temples and eyes that had learned, over 30 years of business, to give very little away. Her name was Sylvie Brennan. She had been born in a 2-bedroom apartment in East Baltimore, raised by a mother who worked nights at a hospital laundry, and she had built, through a combination of ferocity and luck and the specific kind of intelligence that doesn't show up on any test, a technology consulting firm that now employed 412 people. None of that helped her now. She watched her daughter sit at the edge of the bed, holding a stuffed elephant that had lost one of its button eyes, staring at the wall. Zora had always been verbal. Too verbal, Sylvie used to joke, the kind of child who narrated everything she did like a sports commentator giving play-by-play. I'm pouring the cereal now. The cereal is going into the bowl. The milk is cold. She had driven Sylvie and her husband Marcus absolutely crazy with it. And Marcus used to catch Sylvie's eye across the dinner table and mouth, "She gets it from you." And Sylvie would kick him gently under the table and try not to laugh. Marcus had been dead for 6 weeks. The house was very quiet. Sylvie had been managing, in the way that she managed everything, by doing. She had handled the estate, the insurance, the business matters that Marcus had overseen from his side of their shared office. She had arranged the service, chosen the music, written the acknowledgments for the program herself. She had returned to work within 10 days because the alternative was sitting inside this silence, and the silence was something she did not yet know how to survive. But Zora was the one thing she could not fix by working harder. The agency sent 3 candidates. Sylvie interviewed them herself, in the formal sitting room she rarely used, with the door closed and her assistant waiting outside with the next appointment. The first woman spoke in a high, bright voice that sounded like she was reading from a script about children. The second was competent and warm, and cited her credentials with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her value. But something about the way she kept glancing at the photographs on the mantel, the ones of Marcus, made Sylvie want to end the interview early. The third didn't show. She told the agency to send more. The next week, a woman arrived at 10 in the morning carrying a canvas tote bag and wearing a yellow cardigan that had a small ink stain near the left cuff. Her name, according to the intake form, was Priya Ose Mensah. She was 38, had a degree in early childhood education, had worked for the past 4 years with a family in Connecticut whose youngest child had gone through what the reference letter described, carefully, as a significant period of emotional withdrawal following loss. Sylvie did not offer her hand immediately. She looked at her for a moment the way she looked at every new hire, assessing without apology. Priya looked back. "Thank you for coming," Sylvie said. "Of course," Priya said. She did not fill the silence with anything extra. Sylvie noted that. The interview lasted 40 minutes. Priya did not oversell herself. She answered questions directly and said, "I don't know" twice, which in Sylvie's experience was either a very good sign or a very bad one. And she was usually accurate about which. Priya asked about Zora, not about the job requirements, not about the schedule, but about Zora specifically. What did she love before? What were her words like? Did she still draw? Sylvie said, "Why does that matter?" Priya said, "Because grief doesn't erase who someone is, it just buries it. I find it useful to know where to dig." Sylvie looked at her for a long moment. Monday, she said. 8 o'clock. Priya arrived 8 minutes early on Monday, which Sylvie's housekeeper Bet, who had been with the family for 11 years and had opinions about everyone, reported with the mild approval of someone who had been keeping track of such things. Sylvie watched from the upstairs landing as Priya came through the front door, set down her bag, and looked around the foyer with the quiet attention of someone reading a room rather than decorating it. She didn't comment on the house, which was large and well appointed in the way of people who had earned it rather than inherited it. She asked Bet how the morning had been. Bet said, "Quiet." Priya said, "Then let's see." She asked to meet Zora before anything else, before the tour of the house, before the discussion of the daily schedule that Sylvie had printed out and paper-clipped in a folder. Bet led her to Zora's room, knocked gently, opened the door. Zora was at her desk. She had a piece of paper in front of her, but she wasn't drawing on it. She was just looking at it. Priya came in and sat down on the floor, not in a chair. On the floor, cross-legged, at about the same level as Zora's desk, which put her slightly below Zora's eye line. "I like your elephant," she said. Zora didn't answer. "What's his name?" "Nothing." Priya was quiet. She looked around the room slowly, not intrusively, the way someone looks when they're genuinely curious. There was a poster of the solar system on the wall. There was a shelf of chapter books, many of them with cracked spines. There was a drawing pinned above the desk, a house with a large orange sun above it, and two stick figures in the yard, one tall and one small, holding hands. Priya looked at the drawing for a moment and then looked back at the paper on Zora's desk. "You don't have to talk," she said. "I'll just be here." She meant it. She sat there for 20 minutes, doing nothing, while Zora eventually picked up a pencil and began slowly to draw something in the corner of the paper. Sylvie, who was supposed to be on a call with her CFO, was standing in the hallway outside her daughter's room, unable to leave. She told herself she was monitoring the situation. That's what she told herself. She was the kind of woman who had always supervised from a distance, not because she was cold, but because she had learned, very early, that the best way to understand how something actually worked was to watch it when it didn't know you were watching. She had done this with employees, with business partners, with vendors who smiled too easily, and with clients who talked about trust while quietly setting contingencies. She had not expected to do it with a childcare provider in her own home, but she found herself, over the following 2 weeks, pausing in hallways, lingering near the kitchen door when it was barely open, sitting in the small study that shared a wall with the sunroom where Priya and Zora spent their mornings. She told herself it was reasonable diligence. What she heard, through doors and walls and the particular quiet of a house that had too much space in it now, was not what she expected. She expected activities, programs, the structured approach of someone following a therapeutic framework. She had read articles. She knew the language. What she heard instead was very little, and what there was of it was ordinary. Priya narrating whatever she was doing, gently, without expectation of response. "I'm going to open this window a little. The air smells different in the morning, don't you think? Not like afternoon air at all." Zora not answering and Priya not minding. Long silences that were not uncomfortable. The sound of pages turning. Once, the sound of something being poured, juice or water, and then the very small sound of Zora's cup being set back down on the table. 3 weeks in, Sylvie was standing in the hallway outside the sunroom when she heard Zora's voice. It was so unexpected that she didn't breathe. "Do you think he can still see me?" Zora said. A pause. Priya said, "I think so. I think the people we love don't just go to one place. I think they stay a little bit everywhere we are. In things. In places." Another pause. Zora said, "The elephant was his. He gave it to me when I was 4 because I was scared of my first day of preschool." "What's his name?" Priya said. "Buttons," Zora said. "Because of the eyes. He only has one now. Does that bother you?" A long pause. "No," Zora said. "He can still see me with one." Sylvie put her hand flat against the wall and stood there. She had a dinner that evening with her VP of Product Development, a man named Jeffrey, who had been with her since the early days, and who was one of the few people she allowed into the part of her brain where she actually thought, not just the part where she managed. They went to a restaurant she liked, quiet and deliberately unpretentious, and Jeffrey ordered the fish and talked about the fourth quarter projections, and then looked at her across the table and said, "You're somewhere else tonight." "I'm here," she said. "Sylvie." She picked up her water glass and set it down. "The woman I hired for Zora," she said. "She got her to talk today." Jeffrey was quiet. "She got her to talk about Marcus," Sylvie said. "About the elephant. She just sat with her. For 3 weeks she just sat with her and didn't push, and today Zora talked." Jeffrey said, "That's good. I know it's good," Sylvie said. "That's not what I'm." She stopped, looked at the table. "I've been trying for 6 weeks," she said. "I have been in that room. I have sat with her. I have read the books and done the things, and she won't. She hasn't." She stopped again. Jeffrey waited. "She talks to Priya," Sylvie said, "and she doesn't talk to me." She said it very evenly, the way she said things that cost her something to say. Jeffrey looked at her for a moment. "She knows you're grieving too," he said. "You're the person she's most scared to fall apart in front of, because you're the one she needs to hold it together." Sylvie looked at him. "Priya is safe," Jeffrey said, "because she's not everything. You're everything. That's different." Sylvie drove home in silence. She started paying closer attention. Not from the hallway now. She had admitted to herself, quietly, that the hallway listening was less about professional diligence and more about something she didn't have a clean name for yet. Longing, maybe. The specific longing of someone watching their child be reached by a hand that isn't theirs. She noticed things. The way Priya brought the same kind of quiet into every room she entered, not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of someone who was fully, unhurriedly present. The way she spoke to Bet, not with the careful deference of a new employee navigating hierarchy, but with the simple warmth of one adult acknowledging another. The way she noticed things. That Zora preferred her sandwiches cut diagonally. That she got restless after 40 minutes indoors and needed to go outside even if it was only to the back steps. That she processed things through her hands, drawing, folding paper, running her fingers along textures, before she processed them through words. Priya noticed these things and adjusted without announcement. She didn't say, "I've noticed Zora does better when." She just changed what she did. It was the opposite of the way most people worked, in Sylvie's experience. Most people announced their observations. Most people wanted credit for seeing. One afternoon, Sylvie came home an hour earlier than her schedule, said she would. A meeting had canceled, and found Priya and Zora in the backyard. They were not doing any organized activity. They were lying on their backs on the grass, side by side, looking up at the sky. Zora was talking. Not quickly, not the way she used to talk, but steadily, in the careful way of someone testing the ground before putting full weight on it. Sylvie stood at the back door and watched. She should have gone inside. She knew that. She should have given them the privacy of not being observed. She didn't move. Zora said something she couldn't hear. Priya laughed, short, genuine, not performed, and Zora laughed too. It was the first time Sylvie had heard her daughter laugh in 7 weeks. She pressed her hand over her mouth. She told herself she owed it to Zora to know who this woman was. She told herself it was responsible. She told herself a lot of things. What she did was call the family in Connecticut, not the agency. The family directly. She had the number from the original reference packet, a detail she'd kept, because she kept everything. And she called on a Thursday afternoon from her car, which was the place she made calls. She didn't want anyone to know she was making. The woman who answered was named Diane, and she had the voice of someone who had been through something and come out the other side of it. Sylvie introduced herself and explained, briefly, and Diane was quiet for a moment and then said, "Oh, Priya." "Yes," Sylvie said. "She was with us for 4 years," Diane said. "My son, he was 6 when his father and I divorced. Ugly divorce. And he stopped. For about 4 months he just stopped. Wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat much, started having nightmares. We tried 3 different people before Priya. What did she do?" Sylvie said. Diane was quiet for a moment. "She showed up," she said. That sounds too simple, I know. But she just kept showing up. Same time, same self, you know? And eventually he started to believe she was going to keep coming back. And once he believed that, he started to let her in. Sylvie looked at the steering wheel. I cried when she left, Diane said. My son cried, she cried. A pause. She's one of the good ones, the real kind. Sylvie said, thank you, and ended the call. She sat in the car for a while. The thing she had not expected was that Priya would be easy to talk to. She had not been looking for that. She had been looking for competence, reliability, the professional distance that was, in her experience, the thing that made a working relationship work. She had enough people she could talk to. She had Jeffrey. She had her mother, who was 73 and sharp as ever, and called every Sunday from the house in Baltimore that Sylvie had quietly paid off 3 years ago, without mentioning it, until her mother noticed and called her, furious and grateful in equal measure. But one evening, Priya stayed late, because there had been a dinner commitment. Sylvie hadn't been able to move. And when Sylvie came home at 9:30, Priya was in the kitchen with Bet, and they were talking about nothing in particular. Bet's sister's garden, a particular variety of tomato, the way certain things grew better in shade than in sun. And Sylvie poured herself a glass of water and somehow did not go upstairs. She stood at the counter. Priya looked at her. How was it? Fine, Sylvie said. Long. Bet excused herself with the tact of someone who had been in service a long time. And then it was just the two of them in the kitchen with the overhead light doing what overhead lights did, and Sylvie's water glass growing warm in her hand. She fell asleep easily tonight, Priya said. She wanted to tell you something when you got home, but she couldn't stay awake. Sylvie looked at her. What did she want to tell me? She drew a picture today. She said it was for you. Priya reached into the canvas tote bag, which was sitting on one of the kitchen chairs, and pulled out a piece of folded paper. She set it on the counter without ceremony. Sylvie unfolded it. It was a drawing in blue and purple crayon, two figures, one tall and one small, and above them a very large sun and below them what appeared to be grass. In the corner, in Zora's careful 9-year-old handwriting, it said, Me and Mom, I love you. The I was lowercase. Sylvie stood there holding the drawing. She didn't ask me to give it to you, Priya said quietly. She left it on the kitchen table. She knew I'd see it. Sylvie folded the drawing back along its creases. She did it very carefully, the way she would have handled something that cost a great deal. Then, she set it on the counter and put both hands flat on either side of it and looked at it. I don't know how to let her see me grieve, Sylvie said. It came out without planning. I keep thinking, if she sees that I'm not holding it together, she already knows you're not holding it together, Priya said, not unkindly, directly. Sylvie looked at her. She can feel it, Priya said. Children always can. She doesn't need you to be not grieving. She needs to know it's okay that she is. Sylvie was quiet. She's waiting for permission, Priya said. From you, not from me. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the night was doing what nights in October did. Settling, cooling, pulling the last of the day's warmth down into the ground. Sylvie said, How do you know this? Priya said, I watched my mother grieve my father and pretend she wasn't, and I spent a long time being afraid I wasn't allowed to either. A pause. I'm sorry, Sylvie said. I'm okay now, Priya said. It just took a while to figure out that sad wasn't the same as broken. She went into Zora's room that night. She didn't turn on the light. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, and Zora, who was not fully asleep, moved a little and then stilled. Sylvie sat there. After a while she said, very quietly, I miss him too. The room was quiet. Then Zora reached out from under the blanket blindly and found Sylvie's hand. They stayed like that for a long time. Nobody said anything else. The house settled around them the way houses do at night, all its small sounds. The window was cracked, and the air coming in was cool and smelled like dirt and something almost sweet, the last of the fall flowers in the yard. Eventually Zora's breathing slowed. Sylvie sat there until she was sure her daughter was fully asleep. Then she got up, very carefully, and went to the door. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking back at the small shape under the blankets. Thank you, she said to no one, and to everyone. She didn't expect what happened next. She had not built it into any calculation, had not seen it coming the way she usually saw things coming, and this surprised her more than the thing itself. She started looking forward to the mornings, not to her schedule, which she always looked forward to, which was something different, the satisfaction of structure, of problems that had solutions, of a day divided into manageable pieces. This was something else. She started getting up earlier than she needed to, and coming downstairs to find the kitchen already warmed up. Priya there before her making coffee she'd learned. Sylvie, took without sugar, Bet not yet in, Zora still asleep, and the two of them in the quiet of early morning before the day asserted itself. They talked. Ordinary things at first, the news, Zora's progress, logistics. But ordinary things have a way of becoming less ordinary when the person you're talking to listens the way Priya listened, which was with the specific attention of someone who was not waiting for a pause so they could speak, but actually receiving what you said. Sylvie noticed this. She noticed most things, but this she noticed with the slight disorientation of someone who had not been listened to that way in some time. Marcus had listened to her like that. She put the thought away. She did not put it far enough. One morning in November, about 2 months after Priya had started, Sylvie came downstairs to find Zora already up, unusual, sitting at the kitchen island while Priya made oatmeal. Zora was talking, steadily, about something that had happened in a dream, and Priya was listening and asking the occasional question. And when Sylvie appeared in the doorway, Zora looked up and said, without preamble, "Mom, I had a dream about Dad." Sylvie stopped. "He was in the backyard," Zora said. "He was fixing the bird feeder. You know how it's been broken? He fixed it and then he waved at me." Sylvie looked at her daughter. "Do you think it means something?" Zora said. Sylvie crossed the kitchen and sat down next to her daughter on one of the island stools and said, "I think it means he's still looking out for you." Zora leaned against her. Sylvie put her arm around her daughter's shoulders and held her there, in the kitchen, in the morning, while Priya quietly stirred the oatmeal and didn't look at either of them, and the light came through the window the way November light does. Low and particular, the kind of light that makes ordinary things look like they've been arranged carefully. She told Jeffrey about it. Not all of it, some of it. He listened, and at the end he said, "What's she like?" "Priya!" Sylvie considered this. "Honest," she said. "Consistent. She means what she says." Jeffrey said, Sylvie looked at him. "What does mean?" "It means I notice you talked about her for 6 minutes and you didn't once mention her job performance." Sylvie was quiet. "Sylvie," Jeffrey said. "She works for me," Sylvie said. "I know. She is Zora's caregiver. I know that too." Sylvie looked at her coffee. "Grief does strange things," Jeffrey said, not unkindly. "It opens things up. Things you thought you'd put away." He paused. "It doesn't mean you can't pay attention to what's there." "She works for me," Sylvie said again. Jeffrey looked at her with the patience of a man who had known her for 22 years. "Okay," he said. She didn't do anything about it. She was careful not to do anything about it. She maintained the professional structure of their arrangement with deliberate precision. She left the morning conversations at conversation and did not let them become anything else. She was unfailingly appropriate in every interaction. She told herself this was because it was the right thing. And it was. It was the right thing. But she was also aware, with the honesty she applied to herself when no one was watching, that some portion of her carefulness came from fear. She had lost Marcus. She did not know how to want something and hold it loosely enough not to be destroyed if it went away. It was Zora, in the end, who undid all of that. It was a Sunday in December, early afternoon, and Sylvie was in the study working through a contract. And Zora came in and stood in the doorway with the elephant under her arm and said, "Mom, yeah, baby. I want Priya to come to Thanksgiving." Sylvie looked up from the contract. "Thanksgiving was last month. I know. I mean next year." A pause. "I want her to always come to things." Sylvie set down her pen. Zora said, "She makes you different." Sylvie said carefully, "What do you mean?" "You laugh more," Zora said, "when she's here. You're more like how you used to be. She considered this. I like it. Then she left, the way 9-year-olds leave, completely without ceremony, already on to the next thing. Sylvie sat in the study for a while after that. The contract was still open on the desk. The afternoon light was moving across the floor in the slow way of winter light. From somewhere in the house, she could hear Zora's voice and then, after a moment, Priya's. Some question about something, some ordinary exchange in the easy back and forth they had built over 4 months. Sylvie closed the contract. She found Priya in the kitchen, just the two of them, Bet gone for the afternoon, Zora occupied upstairs. She didn't plan what she said. She was not someone who did her best thinking when she planned. She stood at the other side of the kitchen island and said, I'd like to talk to you about something. Priya looked at her. She had the canvas tote on the counter, and she had been putting something away in it, and she stopped and gave Sylvie her full attention the way she gave everything, her full attention, completely and without performance. Sylvie said, I think you know that what you've done here, for Zora, isn't something I can quantify, and I don't want to, but I want you to know that I see it. Priya said, Thank you. I also want to say, Sylvie stopped, looked at the counter. I'm aware this is not appropriate to say. Priya was very still. I'm aware of what our arrangement is, Sylvie said, and I'm not asking you to do anything with this information. I'm not suggesting anything should change. I think you should know that the mornings are the best part of my day, and that has nothing to do with Zora. The kitchen was quiet. Priya said, I know. Sylvie looked at her. I know, Priya said again, quietly. They're the best part of mine too. Nobody moved. Then Priya said, I think we'd have to be careful. About Zora. She's doing better, but she still needs. I know, Sylvie said. I know exactly what she needs. I would never let anything compromise that. Not for anything. I know you wouldn't, Priya said. And the thing was, she said it simply, like a thing she was certain of. And Sylvie, who had spent 30 years building a world where she did not need anyone to simply believe in her character, felt something in her chest that she did not have an efficient word for. Then we go slowly, Sylvie said. Priya looked at her. How slowly? As slowly as it needs to go. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I can do that. The bird feeder in the backyard had been broken since October. Sylvie ordered the replacement part on a Monday. It arrived by Wednesday. On Saturday morning, she was out in the yard with Zora, both of them in coats, Zora holding the pieces, and Sylvie doing the actual work with a screwdriver that kept slipping. Priya came out with coffee and stood on the back steps and watched. Zora said, very seriously, Dad used to be better at this. Dad was better at everything involving tools, Sylvie said. I have other skills? What skills? Negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts. Zora considered this. That doesn't fix bird feeders, though. No, Sylvie said. It doesn't. She got the last piece in. She stood up and brushed her hands on her coat and looked at the feeder, which was whole again, turning slowly in the winter breeze. Zora looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at Priya on the steps, and then at Sylvie. I think Dad saw, she said. Sylvie looked at the feeder. She looked at the yard, at the winter bare trees, at the pale December sky with its peculiar brightness. She looked at Priya on the steps with 2 cups of coffee, patient and still, waiting. I think so too, she said, and she meant it. Not as comfort, not as a strategy to manage a 9-year-old's grief, but as a thing she actually believed. Standing in her backyard in December with her daughter beside her and something, for the first time in a long time, beginning quietly to grow.